here? Hey, I'm doing a little talk here. Post your questions. Let's see. Do you have any questions? You. Bear with me. Hi. G plus. You're welcome. Welcome and hello to the morning. So right now, I am planning to do daily talks, and I apologize for the long delay. I'll annotate that if anyone is watching the video, what's going on. I'm kind of new with Google Plus, and but I got to learn, and this is the only way to learn. And I'm using my second Google account because my primary Google account has a copyright ping on it from some idiot, which is a long story, which I'm not going to go into. But anyway, and there's no way to remove it, so you have to be really careful sharing content. And if someone claims a copyright on it, then it could cause you to lose some of the features on YouTube. With that said, at least I've got two accounts, and this one allows me to do a talk that is actually going to broadcast directly to my FOUNDUPS TV channel. So I'm wondering if anyone's going to join. I don't see anyone joining yet. I'm sitting here, and I'm going to basically let's see, pause this. Can I pause and go live again? I guess if I stop broadcasting, I'm going to lose it. So let me just basically talk about FoundUps and my story. And basically, there's a really good talk of mine, and actually, this is the talk. I'm going to paste it here in the link, all right, that basically talks about how FoundUps happened. But really quickly, what happened was I'd been working on a startup called Education Using Information Technology, since 2001, and pretty much spent 7 years trying to get it going, and even had plans to go to India and everything else. But in a nutshell, the whole idea of Eduit is providing autonomous learning via PCs back then. But now, obviously, PCs are smart devices. So the idea is, back before those cameras that looked at you, I was saying we need a camera in the front, and actually the Nintendo DS had a camera in the front, right? The camera can monitor the reactions, the engagement of the student, and simple AI software that DARPA developed over 10, 15, nearly 20 years now. There's DARPA technology. Sirio is built on it. There's a lot of AI out there now that's driving, like Google Translation and the whole text recognition. We have everything we need, is the bottom line. And basically, the AI would feed the content, the open education content, to the end users. That was Eduit. But after 7 years trying to get it going, I was frustrated. It was 2009. I just launched the minimal viable product, which was something we needed, called Wikitube TV, and which I had the first software on the web that actually had playlists, had autoplay features for YouTube, because I knew that delivering the educational content would have to be multimedia, and there was no really multimedia solution out there. So I assembled a team, we coded it out, and yet we couldn't get funding. So I kind of was frustrated, and I said, you know what? I mean, I've got a master's degree. I have a background in raising money. I've got background in business development. I've got background in marketing. I have a pretty good, strong background in social media. I've got a pretty massive presence on the web. If you just type in, Michael Trouter, FoundUps, or Open Startups, for the most part, it's going to be me. And I have about 1,000 videos. It's not like I'm like, I don't have the skill set. Why the heck can't I get a startup? And not only that, I launched the Shakespeare Festival as a college student that attracted over 100,000 people, right? And it was a mad success. So what did I do right there, and what was it that made that startup happen, and why can't I get these other startups happening? So that was kind of the frustration that I was kind of going to and happening back in the day. So I decided to kind of look at the startup, and what I discovered was that what, I'm not alone, in that there are 3 stages to the startup, and I talk about it in this talk. And the bottom line, I don't want to go, you can watch this talk. I want to get on the FoundUps, but the bottom line is over 99.97% of pre-seed, that's the idea stage, right? The pre-seed startup failed to become seed. Seed is the moment that either makes 600,000 in net 100,000 in net profits, because net profits can be reinvested into it, or they get accredited investors that invest 100,000 plus into the idea. And and I was like, wow, are all ideas that bad? And I'm like, no. And what happened is we've moved from the whole this whole paradigm that ideas aren't what's important. But if you listen to anyone, from Nikola Tesla to Bell, to any major innovator, any major forefather of innovation, everyone will tell you the idea is king. The idea is the most important thing. And we've lost that, because what's happened is, what's become most important is who you're connected to, right? Are you connected to access to capital? because those that are connected to access to capital, and I don't mean, connected does not mean I have a connection with some VC. A connection is, it's in sales term we call it a warm referral, is when you're connected to someone that has access, that believes in you, right? And it's because of that connection that you're able to launch your innovation, because if that person who has access to capital believes in you, then he's going to open his door to the others that are within his network. And the other thing that I realized is that the same law of diffusion of innovation that governs the customer adaptation, right? It covers the market adaptation, also applies to investors. And I created something, well, it applies to investors, and it also applies to launching new innovation, right? So the way it applies to investors is that of the investors that may believe in you, or actually you have access to, what you have to realize, according to this law of diffusion of innovation, and you can think of it as law of diffusion of investments, right, is that only 2.5% of those investors that you have access will invest in your idea, providing the idea falls within their paradigm, which leads me to another law, right? The law of paradigm diffusion. So, and this is another problem, that unless the paradigm exists and they get it, and this is the reason why you'll see trends, startup trends. One thing kind of becomes hot, right? And you're wrong. Why is all of a sudden everyone's launching this? Why is everyone doing this? Like right now, crowdfunding. The reality is the crowdfunding paradigm has happened, right? It's no longer a paradigm shift or a new paradigm. 5 years ago, it was. Getting people to fund crowdfunding 5 years ago was very difficult, especially equity-based crowdfunding. But now, because of the SEC and stuff, that's changed. So ultimately, what we have to realize is that investments, one is you got to have the investor, two, you have to have the investor that understands your paradigm. So if you're doing something like me, right, or something like Bill Gates did, or something like Steve Jobs did, or Michael Dell, you're dealing with ushering in a new paradigm shift. And unless that investor, again, so you're dealing with only 2.5% of the investors are going to invest in new innovation, and of those 2.5, now you're probably going to grasp what I'm saying. Only 2.5% of those 2.5 are going to grasp your paradigm shift, right? And what I call, they become what's known as a leap of faith investor. So what happens is, as a result of these, this law of diffusion of innovation, that is the same law that impacts the law of paradigm diffusion. It's the same law that impacts the law of investor, right? The law of seed investments. What happens is it becomes extremely difficult to launch new innovation, and that's what we've been seeing with, especially like social capital innovation and everything else. We've seen this in so many different areas like solar and renewable energy. It took forever. This technology has been with us for a very long time, but it's taken a very long time for that, for the new paradigm to diffuse down. So, in my 4-year soul searching and realization, as I realized in essence that the startup was systemically flawed, and not only that, all right, not only that, there was even a bigger problem. And in 2012, I learned about this problem from Paul Gilding, right, from The Earth is Full, the TED Talk, and now this paradigm is growing and growing and growing. Is in David Suzuki more recently, you can watch this. There's a host of other talks out there that you can look at, and ultimately what it means is that our business model is systemically flawed. There's a flaw in our business model, and I have talks on it, but really the flaw is this: is that our business model is based on what's known as an exponential function of growth in order for an investor to provide capital for that innovation. What it means is, when I say an exponential growth, right, it means what percent return am I going to get for my investment? A 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, 10%. Investors want a 10 times or 100 times return on their investment, right? They're putting up risk and everything else. Well, what people don't realize is that any sort of innovation that is based on an exponential growth function, right? That growth function is going to have an impact on a finite number of resources on our planet, right? So if I'm investing into lumber or timber or oil or anything else, then there is going to be an exponential growth in, new oil research and platforms and everything else. And all of these things, or let's say iPhones, right? iPhones, you need all these precious metals for an iPhone or flat screen TV, which means we've got to, start mining more of this, gold and platinum and everything else, which means we're going to have to disrupt the environment and everything else in order to create it. And we have to remember that we live on a finite planet. We live on a planet that basically has so many resources. So what I realized, and actually I only realized this year, it's been in my subconscious mind, is that all the innovation that we have ever launched on this planet has basically been launched via startups and investments. And as a consequence, every one of these innovations has directly impacted our resource finite planet. And thus you can extrapolate and say every startup, or the startup is responsible for every crisis facing our planet. From the, we have, and just to talk about that, we've got the bees crashing, and I discovered the reason for bees crashing very quickly in 2000. And I learned about it in 2011. Between 2011 and 2012, I did research. I stumbled on some data and realized that it was pesticides. And it's really simple. I mean, as an innovator, I saw a graph and I said, you know what? That graph, which was the EPA data on the decline of bees, looks a lot like an exponential growth reverse, like it was the law of diffusion of innovation, that the exponential growth function that's used in that chart. I said it looks like the reverse, and I started asking myself, well, what happened? Because the data started in the 1950s. What happened in 1950? I said, well, what's about? And I was like, well, pesticides. What's the story about pesticides in the 1950s? And guess what? 1950 is considered the birth date of pesticides that were innovated in the late, in the 1940s, and really the innovation was launched via startups in the 1950s. And the market diffusion of pesticides over the same period pretty much maps exactly over the decline of bees over the same period. The bees have been declining since the 1950s, since the birth of pesticides. And the odd thing about the data is that there's only one time in the data where bees recover, and that was oddly between 1978 and 1992. Now it's funny enough because in the graph it shows then the bees just basically crashing in 2004, and it's blamed on the mites. But the reality is, and if you do the research on mites didn't hit the United States until 1988. So the crashing that happened in 1982, between 1982 and 1984, and so on, is not because of mites, but actually because of introducing of new fungicides and a massive relaxation of laws that Carter implemented because of the Rachel Carlson Limits to Growth book that came out in 1962, and created a massive environmental movement, and basically secured an environmental protection president that issued the most restrictive pesticide regulation in the history of pesticides in the United States. We've never seen pesticide regulation as strict or as restrictive as we had seen by Carter. And every one of those were removed, and 20 odd EPA directors were fired by Reagan to clean house, because he just, he got rid of them all, and the birth of the lobbyist happened in that same period, and pretty much we gave up on Rachel Carson's warning, and pretty much what she had forecasted now is or has come true, depending on your perspective. So the bees is one, right? So pesticides are directly now linked to the decline of bees. And here's some more. And if you're like, well, you want more evidence? Here, I'll give you some more data. Look at every region in the planet, all right, that has a significant pesticide market diffusion. Look at every place on the planet has a late majority market diffusion of pesticides, has a significant bee collapse. In areas of the world that has basically an early adapter, right, of pesticides, or even an early majority adapter, not a late majority, has a significantly less. So basically, what I'm saying is this: is that if you look at the market adaptation of pesticides globally, those market that have adapted pesticides more than others has more bee loss than others. It's very simple. There is not one market in the world, and people say, well, look, Australia's not losing. Well, for the most part, Australia doesn't have the adaptation of pesticides as we do, right? The size of their country and everything else, they don't have the market diffusion of pesticides as we do in the United States. So, and especially like New Zealand is also true, and that's why the bees seem to be fine in New Zealand and also be fine in Australia. They don't have the GMO crops and everything else, and people, you can talk about the GMO, people say, well, there's no evidence of health decline on GMOs. Well, the problem is when they do the studies, like on Roundup Ready corn, they do the study on the person eating the corn, right, without the Roundup. And obviously, the real problem with Roundup Ready is the toxins that are put in there. So I always tell people, I mean, do you want to eat food that is basically toxic with either BT gut rotting pesticides or Roundup? Have you ever seen anyone spray Roundup? They don't spray Roundup and relax. It's a serious endeavor, and they put a lot of protection. And those farmers now who've been spraying Roundup in Asia are coming down with basically a kidney failure epidemic, because the Roundup is leaking into their water, interacting with the heavy metals in the water. They're drinking the water because I need a thirst. They just drink the water, right? They've been drinking the water for thousands of years, but now with the Roundup, it's basically collapsing their kidneys. So ultimately, every problem, you look at the forest, deforestation, you look at our fisheries collapse, you look at our pollution, you look at plastic, and 40% of our ocean now is covered in plastic. You look at the collapse of, right now we're in the sixth grade extinction, and 50% of our species are in the process of collapsing. Everything can be argued it's tied to innovation that was launched via startups. So FOUNDUPS, moving on to FOUNDUPS. FOUNDUPS is an idea of mine, which I have to give credit to permaculture, because I kind of walked away from FOUNDUPS frustrated because I was focused on launching net innovations and everything else, and I discovered permaculture. And permaculture is basically a relatively new paradigm. It's only 40 years old, and it deals with launching and living in a sustainable way. That there's some precepts that I've adapted for the FOUNDUP. I took from the permaculture. It's slightly different than permaculture, and those precepts are help the planet, help its living systems, share the knowledge, share the surplus, which in my view is share the net profits of 80% of the net profits. And basically, the FoundUp, you have to think of a FoundUp as more of like a hobby, an idea, something that you love, something that you're passionate about. If you're passionate about your health, you're passionate about your food, are you passionate about your community, are you passionate about, you know, what's happening around you? Because ultimately, everything around us is collapsing, and whether it's, you know, our food systems, whether it's our riverbanks, whether it's our water, you know, let me just take a side road and talk about water really quick, because most people don't realize our fresh water is a very rare commodity on our planet. You know, most of our planet's water, but most people don't realize only 0.035% of the planet's water is fresh and accessible to us. Most of the other water is either tied up in glaciers or deep underground, which now pollutions and fracking and everything else is messing up, right? We've launched an innovation called fracking, which is to get natural gas out of the ground. But in the process of doing that, we're pumping these very toxic chemicals into our water that makes up only 0.035% that we have accessible to. But the other water that now is deep underground, guess what? We're going to screw that up too with fracking. Aren't we a brilliant species? So basically, a FoundUp is our ideas for helping our planet, right? Helping living systems. We are living systems, so anything that helps, helping us to read, to learn to write, getting education, that's helping, you know, living systems. Doing permaculture gardens. I have something called My Salad Garden, right? I launched this year that now has my family eating more vegetables and greens than ever. I didn't, you know, lost weight, health, everything else is you know, is an important factor. And you know, and the idea is for us as the people for the people to realize that we can save our planet by doing it without the need to beg, to march, to sign petitions, by simply launching FoundUps. And ultimately, all that we need to do is to do them, right? So if you have any questions about FoundUps, ask me. You know, like, why 80%? Maybe is a question. People say, oh, 80% seems so much. It's of net profits, and for the most part, FoundUps are on what's known on a what's the word? I'm trying to think of on an honor system, right? Launching FoundUps for the most part honor systems. 99% of FoundUps will not be for profit. 99% of FoundUps will be to feed your family, to make your community better. However, they may generate a profit, okay? Like My Salad Garden is generating a profit, small profit for me. My permaculture FoundUp for my school is generating a small profit. Now what I want to do is turn around and take that small profit and help people launch their salad gardens, and their, you know, cover the seeds, to cover any like external costs for it, right? To cover their water bill, right? And ultimately share the, you know, the net profits with others. So, but however, what people need to realize is that FoundUps itself is a Delaware C corporation, and we are going to launch some major game changers, like the eSingularity platform for global education, like Com Solar for community solar, and you know, and Play FoundUps app for launching FoundUps. There are, you know, we are no different than a Google. We're set up corporately the same way as a Google. Here's the difference, though. What I'm doing is gifting my personal equity to those that are patrons, right, who are RC. The first 100 are guaranteed to get undilutable equity to a sum of 10,000. Let me talk about that. Undilutable means every time we issue more shares, the number of base shares that you have because of the warrant that you hold. A warrant is just a contract. You're not going to get any shares from me. You're just going to contract saying, listen, when we do an IPO or when we are sold, which will never be sold, I'll never sell FoundUps. Okay, if someone comes to me and says, oh, here's $1 billion for FoundUps, I'll say, I'm sorry, but you know, is not for sale. Money is not something that I care about. Saving the planet is. And as long as I can become the visionary and I'm the driver, right, on the ship directing FoundUps, I know that I can save the planet. I don't trust anyone else to do it. Okay, it's maybe I think I'm the one to do it. And all the money in the world, the planet, to me, the mother, our planet is worth more than all the money in the world, right? You don't have enough money to buy FoundUps. FoundUps is basically priceless. That's my point. So, but I need to put that in there just to protect you as an investor. That if it's sold, right, then you would your warrant offering would activate. And I use an example for if Google had been a found-up, not a startup, and they had 20 million shares issued like I do, and they basically gifted their shares to the folks that seeded their idea, that basically used their platform and gave them just 100 shares for every dollar they put in a month. As long as they maintain the way I have it, as long as you're a patron, you're going to get 100 shares a month. It's going to cap at 10,000 shares. So that's the cap. No one can own more than 10,000 shares in FoundUps Corp. And ultimately, if, for example, we issued more shares, and let's say you had just $1, which was 100 shares, just for simplicity, and we did our IPO today, and the price was $500 a share, like it is for Google, then that $1, which would equivalent to initially 100 shares, and Google went from 20,000 shares to 600,000 shares. That's a 30-time dilution. So you take the 100 times 30, that's a 3,000. Multiply that by the share value, which is $5.50, you get $1.65 million. Right? That's your return on $1 invested in Google idea back in 1996 if it was a found-up. So understand you're not going to get $1.6 million because, remember, there's that whole 80% rule. So 80% of net profits must be reinvested launching more founders. What does that mean? It means that when we do our IPO, and the real value of FoundUps that people need to understand is that the 1% of ideas that are revenue generators, right, the innovations, everything else, are going to stay part of FoundUps Corp for the most part. There's no reason for them to roll out, and I'll talk about that next. Because ultimately, let me go back to the investment. All right, I don't want to go on the next one before I talk about it. So that of that 1.65 million, you would have to reinvest 1.32 million into launching more FoundUps, right? FoundUps you're choosing, any FoundUp in the world, right? Now what you're going to do is you've just become what's known as an archangel. You've become a FoundUp archangel. Just because of that $1 that you put in FoundUps Corp, we went, we did our IPO. It's worth, 1.3 million in funds, and you're going to allocate those funds via our Play FoundUps app into all these cool FoundUps. You'll just go around. If people want to know you, you'll become, you become like this accredited investor all of a sudden, right? But you're not. Well, technically you would be, but you're not. You're an archangel. And the other 323,000, whatever it is, would actually be your money. So for $1 to get 330,000 back, that's not a bad investment, right? That's fair. So why do I think that 99% or 95? I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to say 95% of FoundUps will remain part of FoundUps Corp and not roll out. Well, because as long as you're part of FoundUps Corp, there is no risk of losing, right? Because, and this is why people join Warren Buffett. This is why people join their ideas to Google and Microsoft. This is why all these companies now are kind of launching all these events to capture ideas. Because if I can give you equity in FoundUps Corp, right, for your idea, and it launches, even if later, and I'll use an example, Advark is a great example from Google. Advark was a basically ask a question startup where you could just ask questions and your network would respond to them. But it got a little old. I mean, you're just constantly asking questions and you're not getting any money from, you're not getting any reward from it, right? and ultimately Google paid $40 million for that idea. Now, did they give him $40 million cash? No, they gave him 1,000 shares. Back then, Google's worth $400 a share. Now they're worth 550. Even though Advark failed, those shares went up $100.50, right? So even so, they can't lose. So why would you roll your idea out of FounduPs Corp if we validate it and it starts off as a simple hobby, and that hobby all of a sudden starts generating a lot of income and new growth and everything else, and you come to us and say, listen, or we see it, we say, hey, there's a business here. Let us kind of, let's wrap it and let's put some money behind it and let's make it happen. And let's get someone who can run it and manage it and everything else, and you're still going to be the chairman of the board and everything else, and all of a sudden it becomes a qualified subsidiary of FounduPs Corp, kind of like how YouTube is to Google. It's an entity, but within our corporate entity. Why would you roll out? Right? You can run it. You have all the decision. You're the chairman. Kind of like how Warren Buffett comes in and says, "Listen, I want you part of my family, the Hathaway Group. I'm not going to tell you how you run your business. You're doing a great job. I just want you part of the family." So what I can guarantee is you can't fail, because I'm giving you shares in Hathaway that have just been going up and up and up and up. So by adding, so what Warren Buffett is doing is in a way what we're doing as the people, for the people. So we're creating a massive Hathaway Group for the people of the planet, and I'm inviting you to be part of it. So the more you think about FoundUps, and the more you realize the scope, when you're investing in supporting foundups.com, becoming a patron, ultimately what you're hedging is that, if this becomes an IPO or is sold, we're going to I'm going to be able to help a lot of people and make a little money on the side. Now let's talk about like one of our projects called ComSolar, Community Solar, power for the people, by the people. Imagine, launching every month, launching a solar farm. Imagine every month giving someone solar for doing FoundUps. Hey, you know what? You are a pioneer. You are a winner. I want to give you solar for free. We're going to come in up to a $10,000 cost. We're going to build it locally. We're going to install it. We're going to make it a video. We're going to make it all this stuff, and we're going to put it in. That's ComSolar 1.0. ComSolar 2.0 is all of a sudden, guess what? We're going to launch, power stations all around the planet. Well, people say, well, there's no value. The return on solar is kind of small, yada 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 yada. But that's not the point. The point is, every time we launch a solar farm or a wind farm, any sort of renewable energy, the valuation on FoundUps Corp is keep going up. The valuation, even if those projects don't make money, the valuation on our entity, FoundUps Corp, just kind of how Google does, by Google adding more projects to them, increases the valuation of the company, increases the share value. So simply by giving away and launching and doing, the core valuation of FoundUps Corp is going to keep going up and up and up. And that's what you have to realize. That is why it's such a good idea to become a stakeholder and to be part of FoundUps. I hope you enjoyed this talk. It's kind of long, and my name is Michael Trout. If you have any questions, type them in this video, and I'm going to see how this turns out. Thank you very much for watching.